The greatest thing from Quebec since Celine Dion and GSP.
A pair of siblings.
A couple of stellar young men.
Two brothers.
These two young men.
Two siblings.
The hard-hitting pair represent Canada.
Welcome to Thinkin Bros. My name is Chris.
And I'm Alex.
We're your favorite corner store philosophers trying to figure out life one conundrum at a time. And today we're going to be talking about Camus's The Stranger, which I was checking out a list of top 50 books on YouTube, and it was number 40. And not to spoil both of our opinion on it, but we read only the first part.
And we think it should change positions.
Yeah, we should change. Now, you guys, if you're good at tonal recognition and social intelligence, maybe you might guess if we think you should go up or down.
Or out.
Or out. And we'll see. And we'll see later in the episode what it is. Now, I was going to say, I know Marcus Aurelius teaches us to not be reactive, but I think I have a little red spot on my forehead, which is called an allergic reaction. So it should tell you guys where I'm at in my stoic journey and non-reactiveness. And the second thing we're going to be talking about is Alan Watts on Being God, which is a lecture from around the 1970s. And it's part of his podcast in the Ram Dass Be Here Now network. It's episode 6, I believe. Anyway, we watched it. It's a lecture. And we're going to be starting off with that in the deep hope that we don't get to Camus and we can get over an hour with just Alan Watts. Right? So let's maybe
and then we can
started.
do whatever we want with
We can do whatever we want.
You have more intimate knowledge of Alan Watts, but I think it continued in the sense that I get. Maybe he focuses more on Zen Buddhism here or on another Eastern religion there. But I think like the overall sense is that he has one ideology, not of his own, but that he finds permeates across everything. And he finds parallels in everything, in Western religions as well as Eastern religions. And whatever, in popular culture and science, he makes so many parallels into one cohesive worldview. And we really see that in this episode where he doesn't even talk about Eastern religion that much. He talks about Western religion, Christianity.
It's true. He does have a Buddhist undertone to all his arguments and even uses these similes. We'll see that later. But this is pretty much purely about Christianity. And I mean, let's just start off with how enjoyable do you think the 1970s were? Because the second part, but the second part of the lecture is essentially him. We'll get to how that makes sense, but essentially him pretending to be Jesus, God, and just the questions that people ask, the things people laugh at. Do you not feel how it's just so much more human than it is now? Do you feel what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. But at the same time, another comment I had about the laughs is that I feel like every single time people laugh, and he doesn't laugh, he's 100% serious. And then people like interpret it as a joke. And it is funny, but he's serious. I wonder how he feels about people laughing when he says stuff.
I think I've noticed that throughout his lectures, he has these metaphors that are really, really well crafted. I think what he does as a public speaker resembles a lot what stand-up comedians do, where they really have to read the room and craft their speeches and cut off words that are unnecessary. Because I remember he uses the following metaphor for when people are told to relax in the West, they think it's just becoming a puddle of goo. And if you tell people to lay perfectly on the floor and just relax, you're going to see two kinds of people. You're either going to see people with all kinds of tensions who are laying on the floor as if they're scared to fall through it, right? And you're going to see the other opposite. And when you tell them to relax to these people, you're going to see the other opposite where they just become a puddle of jelly, essentially, a boneless puddle of jelly. And that's what they think relaxing is. But actually relaxing, and this can be seen in the meditative positions, is really to have tone. There's a tone to your relaxation, right? There are some muscles that have to keep you in place. You have to be there. But what is unnecessary must be fully relaxed, right? Like your traps would be relaxed, but your core would still keep you stable in the meditative position.
Right.
So it's really a balance. And he has these similes like falling through the floor. Is that a simile? Who knows what that is?
I don't know what
What's a metaphor, a simile, a parable? What are all these things?
What's a crosswalk?
That's so
Right?
fair. I mean, that's so fair. But anyway. And I've noted these patterns where to explain this concept, he has this perfectly crafted thing. And if you just watch one episode of him, as we did, well, as you did at the very least, you're going to be amazed at how he just kind of just comes up with these perfect things to describe these and has the perfect metaphors. But you have to understand, like, he has a repertoire of these things that have been worked out through the last 40 years of his life. So it's like perfectly crafted. What was my point with this? Just about like
laughing. I guess you wanted to say that, like a stand-up comedian, he
yeah. I think he
improvises,
knows. He's very.
but he has a lot of.
I think he's very
stuff in
self-aware. Is what
yeah.
I'm saying. Like I think he knows when he's gonna. People are gonna laugh when he has a. I remember specifically when he says apostolic succession. People laugh. In any case, let's just go point by point through the chronology of the lecture, which I have outlined pretty well here. And we can stop at points and talk about it. We're going to take you through it with us. So, he starts by saying that Western religion is focused on changing belief and behavior, but Eastern religion is focused on changing your view of the world. Right? So that makes sense. Right? The commandments are always like, do this, don't do this. And sure, ultimately, originally, that's done through parables. So you're supposed to internalize it through hearing stories of people doing well and not doing well. But ultimately, if we think like the strict laws of religion, Christianity and the such, they write it down. Like they make it explicit. And I've told you, like I've said in previous episodes, that Buddhism kind of refuses to write down the laws because you would be corrupting it with human imperfections. And it's supposed to be written in your heart, which it is. And okay, just stop me if you have something to say. I have a few points where I know I'm going to stop, but yeah. So, for the West, a deviation of your worldview, or state of consciousness more specifically, as he says it, is a sickness. And that's what you can see in psychotherapy. So he essentially makes a parallel between Eastern religion and psychotherapy because they're both concerned with your state of consciousness. And in Western religion and thought, what lies beneath consciousness is seen as less evolved and more random. So you think the goings-on of nature are fully random and we're these sophisticated beings and humans are at the forefront of everything and our conscious is everything. Now, if you get anywhere in psychology, you know that the subconscious essentially rules you and you have almost, like, you're just a spectator almost to your own life, realistically. Well, not realistically. Deep down. You might think that your conscious has a lot of power, but then you discover that self-control is limited and you can actually just manipulate your environment. But what that is setting up so your subconscious reacts in specific ways. So you can still craft.
I think the point is that your subconscious, we don't even have to say like you don't do anything and your subconscious rules you. It's just that it has immense influence on your everyday behavior, and the only way to tame it, already a bad word, the only way to the only way to live well is to work with it. As you said, changing the environment, changing your habits that then get internalized into the unconscious, and you just get urges coming out of seemingly nowhere to do the right things.
Yeah, that's fair.
You can work with it. That's what I mean. It's like
true.
You have the influence to change. You have the power to change your environment. You have the power to not make the decisions that modify your unconscious thereafter.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't really have a great representation of how I want to, convey how much power the subconscious has, but it has at least as much power as the conscious,
Probably
and
more.
it's
Yeah.
easy to ignore. Like
Yeah.
it's easy to just go through life and be like, no, I'm the decision maker here. But then you discover that you can set yourself up to want things, and the wanting comes from the unconscious, in a way, right?
Yeah.
Although the division of the self will later be criticized, but in any case, and what you have to understand about Eastern thinking and religion is that they have the utmost respect for nature, and essentially humans have as much value in nature as bees do. In fact, even they're less respectable because bees just work all day and carry the pollen for not even their profit, but for the queen's and the colony's profit, while we sometimes oversleep in bed because life is so hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's also interesting that in traditional Chinese paintings, when there's a landscape, what's a landscape? Nature?
Sure. Yeah.
A landscape portrait, a person, a human is never at the forefront. So there's a large, the trees and the nature is put at the front, and then somewhere in the distance there's a person sitting under that tree, right? While in Western art, you would see the person, and then the background would be kind of secondary to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so anyway, traditional Chinese paintings, you barely see humans in it. It's always nature. Man has attempted to take control of this randomness. So as you said, as soon as you try to fight against it, it turns against you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you realize how little control you actually have. But the brain can only attend to 3 variables without a pencil. Psychotherapy is becoming the religion of the West. So this is where the biggest the biggest comparison begins, and the problem comes out, and that's, I think, the argument. And here are the parallels.
Psychoanalysis. Specifically.
Psychoanalysis. At the time, that was the most relevant part of psychology and therapy, I guess. Apostolic succession, passing down of power. So, when he starts listing all these people, like, well, there was first Freud, then he gave it down to Jung and all these other German names, and they're going to give it down. So, just as in religion, there will be passing down of power from one psychotherapist to the other. You can start seeing the parallel there. They have rituals, the sacrament of the couch, spiritual discipline of free association, mystic knowledge of dream analysis. So all these little parallels, and you can definitely start seeing how, well, at the very least, for now it's funny, but then we get to the other distressing factor, right? For now it's like, oh, funny little parallels. I guess that's just how passing out of power works, whatever. So what is the good from this? The good is that it reveals finally to the Western world how much is truly hidden to the subconscious, in the subconscious. And this is largely Freud's contribution.
What, this metaphor with religion specifically?
No, the
psychoanalysis.
The development of the power of psychoanalysis. Like how much power it holds, I mean.
Okay.
And sure, that's parallel to the development of psychoanalysis itself, right? That's fair. Okay, so what is the bad? And the bad is really that making official the judging of human behavior is extremely problematic when you think about it. So the psychological official is the modern priest. And a professor of psychiatry has the same, and this is being said in the 1970s, the professor of psychiatry has the same sort of intellectual authority as a professor of theology in the 1400s. And most of all, what they have is a force of dogma. Both know they are right. Right? In the same sense that a modern psychologist simply knows that this disease stated in the DSM and this disease stated in the DSM is abnormal and requires this treatment, right? These things are known because now they have the power of science. And back in the day, they had the power of theology. And those are both quite undeniable powers in their own respect. And heresy is executed. But the most monstrous thing is that it's done out of kindness. Just as with the Holy Inquisition.
You mean heretics are executed?
Well, yeah, heretics, I guess.
Yeah, but he goes into this whole description of, there's steps to take. Heretics are first they try to, well, first of all, the religious person is convinced that the heretic is going to go to hell and burn for eternity. So they want to save him. Out of kindness, they want to keep him out of hell. And
very importantly, that heresy is also infectious, right? Just as, I guess, mental disease would be.
Yeah,
well, here's where the parallel,
parallel breaks down a little, but especially if his religious heresy is...
Well, you know what? Sorry. The alternate state of consciousness that Jesus had
was
perfectly fits this parallel, right?
Yeah. Right. I don't know exactly what he's ultimately trying to say, because when you take it to its end, we're saying psychotic patients should be embraced and have the real answer.
Well, I also think that the DSM was much more flawed back in the day.
Yeah.
Right. Even homosexuality and stuff.
Right. Yeah. So what was listed as a disease in the DSM.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Anyway, about religion, heretics first. You try to convince them that they're wrong to get them to go to heaven, and especially if it's contagious, because if it's contagious, it's going to spread to other people, and you have to stop it right now. And you take steps, and you step up until you have to burn him at the stake, and hope that at the last second he repents and changes his mind and can go to heaven. Well, the religious people at that time, we need to understand that they really believed what they were doing. It seems like a lot of people would see it as completely crazy, oh my God, what times were those? And it was pretty crazy, people burning people at the stake and everything. But if you put yourself in their shoes and really try to feel what it would feel like to believe that person would burn in hell, and if it spread through society, everyone would burn in hell, be convinced by that entirely. I think if you believe that, there's no big enough steps you can take.
Exactly. I mean, I have it here. If you are a good person, and you believe in all your heart that eternal damnation awaits the heretic, and that heresy is infectious, it becomes logical to execute him.
But at the same time, I feel like that's not what Jesus would have done. And Christians probably should bathe themselves.
# what would Jesus do? Now, I have the final quote just because it was beautifully put. I'll try to say it as masterfully as Alan Watts. As a last resort of desperate...
Squeaking.
As a last desperate resort, you would burn him at the stake in the pious hope that in the midst of those searing fires, he would think better and make a last act of perfect contrition. Don't know what that means. And so be rescued from everlasting damnation. All this in the spirit of, this is going to hurt me more than it is going to hurt you. And that's the scary part. Yeah. And that's the scary part, right? Really. Because
that they can believe that it hurts them more.
Yeah, because when you're doing inhuman things out of kindness is where the true problem arises. I mean, if you have a psychopath who doesn't have empathy, it becomes trivial to just kind of get rid of him, right? Or just imprison him. But this is a societal disease.
Yeah, but I think he makes a good parallel. They were as much convinced of the fact that that's what they needed to do as surgeons right now are look, you have to go on my table. I'm 100% sure that you're going to die if
it's 50-50.
I don't operate you, and there's a 50-50 chance you live. And I know this, and I have to do this.
Yeah.
There's a sense. Now I guess these surgeons are objectively right in the sense that if you let it run its course, that person would die. But not entirely, right? Yeah, anyway. Just back in the day, it was about the afterlife, and we still have no way of knowing what happens there.
Yeah, and essentially, after that, he says that people are arbitrarily put into prisons for having unorthodox states of consciousness. And that essentially right now we know as much about the human brain as they did about the cosmos back when religion was around.
That makes a lot of sense.
And it makes a lot of sense. And I wanted to ask you, do you think, because obviously with my biases, that stands perfectly still in 2024 as it did in 1970s. Do you think that it still stands?
Yeah, I thought about this, how well it would apply now. I think there's little progress that we made. I think I'm hesitant to say this, but can progress be made if we don't know anything? We don't even know how to start on the hard problem of how do neuronal firings become consciousness? What is consciousness? In all fields, you can go down to the bottom and see, yeah, well, there's consciousness, and we have no way of knowing about it and what that is and who has it, and you know this problem of qualia of how do neuronal firings, they correlate with, you know, behavioral outputs and perceptions and everything, but how do they become experience? What is experience? And
Right. It's really how horrible the atomic view is at describing consciousness, right? Because in physics, all right, well, we found the electron and the proton and the smaller parts, and we know exactly how they come together to make a soccer ball. But in psychology, there's just like, even if you find the subatomic, what then? How did they all equate into us thinking about the subatomic, you know?
yeah. So in that sense, I guess there's no progress made, at least in that specific part. But I think a lot more of psychology is science backed and not,
And again, more of psychology in the behavioral sense, right? Like we have good impressions of certain personality traits that lead to behavior and everything that statistics can answer. But when you get to the real crux of it, and we're talking about a question that we don't even know if it's scientific or philosophical, whoops.
Sure, but we're not torturing or killing people over it. I think those were those were the Rosenhan days, right? Where psychiatric hospitals were just
okay. I mean, I'm sorry, but I just think, you know, society's cyclical and whatnot, but for me, the torturing is just always more subtle. I've always said this. We think we've evolved past, these brutes in the 1950s and everything before that, right? These brutes. And we read the, what was the thing about being locked in mental hospitals where you're not sick?
Rosenhan.
Yeah, Rosenhan, but what was the name?
Of that?
Yeah, of that paper.
On being sane in insane places?
Yeah, being sane in insane places. And there's an old blog post where I make a bunch of parallels, like, oh, we don't have public executions anymore, right? Oh, these barbaric people who executed people in public just to demonstrate how bad it would be to... But we have public trials, like the Johnny Depp trial, where his entire life, where he didn't commit the crime, and his entire life was essentially put out to the public to see, and now nothing's private anymore. Like, we just have some more sophisticated forms of the barbaric things that happened before, and in 30 years, people are going to realize that. Just to make the parallel, you're saying we don't do electric shock treatment, we don't publicly...
I didn't say that.
For example, what you're saying is that we're not imprisoning them and killing them, right?
I said torture or killing. Yeah.
Exactly. But what I'm saying is subtly torturing them and slowly killing them are the new sophisticated forms. And those come in the abuse of prescription drugs. And that's the thing. That's a real thing. Like, everyone's on antidepressants, is all I'm saying. Coincidentally. Okay. Let's not get conspiracy theory-y. There should be a word for that. We should make one. That doesn't just add an E to conspiracy theory, because it recurs too much.
You've probably said that like 5 times.
I know. Sorry, did you did you continue? Do you want to continue?
No, go ahead.
And so the interesting thing about the people who are being imprisoned, again, in these times, was that they weren't even dangerous, right? They were provoked into being dangerous by being ignored, treated as machines, and generally defined as non-human. And when you're defined as non-human, there's very little you can do about it. Everything that you say that sounds human is taken as an attempt to manipulate. To put it in Alan Watts' terms, an utterance of a mechanical man as imitating humanness out of lunatic cunning. Very interesting.
And who are those people exactly?
I think here there's more of a parallel with exactly what Jesus was. Okay, if you think about it, right? If someone comes around and says I am God, or I guess I would imagine an enlightened hippie walking around with his retina. What's the
glasses?
No. The black part in the eyes.
Dilated pupils?
With dilated pupils and like seeing right through you, right? How you would imprison that in the 1970s.
Would you?
I would. So I don't look. That's how I imagine what those people look like when Alan Watts is talking about them. And look, I know I see a lot of parallels with today, realistically. I don't want to say what it is, but essentially, if you wanted to condemn someone in the public eye, or even, you know what, let's play it safe. Let me talk about Socrates, right? If you want to ruin someone's public reputation, you have to accuse them of something that... Okay. Well, let me even backtrack further than that, okay? Narratives, as defined by Neil Postman, first time I'm not saying postman, are simply ways to account for the world in an unfalsifiable manner, where both arguing for and against it is impossible. So, well, it's unprovable, let's just say. And later on, we can see that with religion, because when Alan Watts is talking to the class and someone says,
the class,
or, you know, how do you know, well, how do we know you're God? He says, a generation of non-believers demands proof, and so they shall have none. Something like that.
Yeah.
Essentially.
That's pretty good.
It was a good attempt. And obviously the opposite would just be, well, here's the proof, right? So in any case, you're not getting any proof. Now, when you want to accuse someone and you have the power of the public eye, you essentially have to accuse them of something where both the things they say in support of them being guilty and against them being guilty are interpreted as them being guilty. So you would rid them of their humanity. And this is what being in an alternate state of consciousness would be, right? So in the sense of Socrates, well, if gods are extremely important in ancient Greece, and you accuse him of being impious and corrupting the youth, essentially these are seen as disgusting acts. So ultimately, it just doesn't matter what you say. You can't disprove it, because every attempt to defend it would be like, someone who would corrupt the youth would say that to manipulate us into thinking that he's a good guy. And the fear of gods, even with everything Socrates says, is just too strong to... So, in any case, how far have I strayed?
My thing is just what exactly...
Okay, yeah.
Like, the whole general gist, and Alan Watts in general, I love, and even while he's sort of hating on psychotherapy, I like the part when he says, the people that claim they're official psychotherapists, and he has a particular problem with them, that they think they have the answer and they can impose it on others, but he has no problem with unofficial psychotherapists, and he says all the therapists in the audience, that's a way you can get out of being targeted by this speech, is to say you're unofficial therapist. And I guess I should go into this. He says being a therapist, is that it? Is like a musical talent. It's not something that you give to an adult person. You say, here's an instrument, learn it, and then the genius and the creative aspect of musical talent comes out, right? Like, you can learn to play the instrument well, but to be a virtuoso and create music, there's also a part that's innate talent. And having a list of criteria you need to hit before you can become a licensed therapist, because you learn this, and this, he says, would not necessarily qualify you to be a therapist. You would need something else, which is sort of like a talent. Do you not remember that part?
I really didn't remember it like that. I know the one thing he says is that you can only not be qualified to be a therapist for sure, as in you might be the kind of person that will certainly make people worse off,
right?
But being officially qualified to make people better off and fixing them and aligning them with a normal state of consciousness is way too pretentious to make it official.
Right.
That's essentially how I remembered it.
But my question is, what exactly, like, when you go, so the general thing sounds good, but what exactly do you mean? So does he mean that people that have generalized anxiety disorder and worry all the time, they have an altered state of consciousness? What should we do with them? Like, should we not treat them? Should we, when they express distress and seek out help?
Well, I'm not 100% sure.
Is that not part of the population he targets?
No, it must be. It's just, I'm not 100% sure. Well, I forgot what I was not 100% sure about. But what I can say is that you have to understand how prophetic it was in the 1970s, before the Rosenhan or after the Rosenhan. In any case, I think this was around or before the Rosenhan. And essentially, the incompetence of treating mental illness at the time was extremely blatant. Well, at the very least, the people like him who could spot it. But other people just saw these official psychologists or psychotherapists. Like, imagine Freud with his theory treating people now, right? With his part of the problem of Freud's theory, unfalsifiable, right? Imagine him treating the supreme power that he would have now.
Okay, so are you saying then that things have gotten better, and since we have these categories and things are science-based and not purely the theory of one person that's untested, then things are better?
No, I think proportionally society is always the same, in the sense that if we're more sophisticated, our problems are more sophisticated. So all I'm saying is that exactly where the problems are is only going to be apparent in 30 years. But I think there are the same amount of problems. They're just so sophisticated that we don't know. Well, I know. In any case. So, but okay, even if I don't tell you exactly, like, a person with depression walks in and you see him as having a alternate state of consciousness, and now everything he says for or against him being guilty isn't interpreted as human. That's not what I'm saying. Do you see the kind of archetype of the person Alan Watts is talking about when he says that?
I see, when he says that, I see Jesus. I don't see
Yeah.
what is now
The
treated.
parallel?
I don't see anxiety disorders or mood disorders.
Yeah,
well,
but
I guess
that's the thing. That's the normal thing that's diagnosed now.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking if things have gotten better.
No, but
If we're talking,
it's proportionally better because it's diagnosed now, and it's ingrained in your head that that's the right thing to diagnose now. You have to take what is not the right thing to diagnose now, and then go back. And if you go to that, you will see these like LSD-induced hippies, schizophrenics that aren't aggressive, right? People with depression who are saying that everything is hard for them, that they can't do anything, and that life is bleak, and they're seeing everything in black and white,
Okay.
but you're just a normal guy and you're like, what do you mean go work, right? You don't like the things that aren't understandable unless they're articulated by science yet.
Okay, but you just named many things. In what way are the problems, like those problems, are solved as we see them right now?
Yeah, but not in the 1970s, no?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. What I asked earlier was, are you saying things got better? And it seems like for a lot of those things, you're saying back in the 70s, the depression thing was a problem because people...
Well, what I'm trying to answer for you is simply who Alan Watts was referring to as the other side of the parallel with Jesus. Because you can see all these things with Jesus,
Yeah.
but you can't see it with the other side of the parallel. Now, I'm trying to give you all of these people that are now perhaps cured or considered, normal or whatever. Now, if you want an answer to the question, have things gotten better? Well, yes, but proportionally with how society has gotten better, right? With the development of science, all of these things have now been non-problematic. But if I start naming things that in 30 years are going to be seen completely different, you're going to see how we have a lot more progress to do. All I'm saying is our progress in science, well, in psychotherapy and psychology, is proportional to our progress as a society. But it's not, society isn't objectively better than it was 2,000 years ago. We have computers. That's the only difference. All I'm saying is it's all cyclical. I'm not sure what you mean by it's gotten better. It's all yin and yang.
Well, what I mean is that thing he's talking about, things have gotten better, and you seem to agree with that.
The thing that he's talking about, how if someone is rid of his humanity, everything he says will be used against him? No, I don't think that's gotten better.
No. That's the way that psychotherapy or psychiatrists treat people.
Okay. I mean, maybe the scope of how psychiatry treats those people has gotten smaller, and there are only a few diseases that shouldn't be considered diseases, but I think that's now done on another level, on a legal level. I think now... All right, well, let's get into it. I think now tweets from 10 years ago and clips of 15 seconds can be used to confirm people's biases about you instantly and disprove everything else that you've done as a good thing in your life ever. And if someone wants to paint a narrative, I think narrative manipulation in a post-truth society through technological advancement has taken over this. Like, I'll just say it. Yeah, that's what it is. It's not you can put homosexuality in the DSM and now suddenly you have the monopoly on saying those people aren't normal. Now it's more sophisticated, so it's upgraded from the problem has upgraded from psychology to the law, politics, mass media manipulation, and stuff like that. That's my argument. That's why I didn't want to get into that, and why I couldn't answer your question.
Okay, sure, but I mean, you understand how you shifted that. We're not talking about psychiatrists that are certified for mental health problems anymore. We're just talking about random people.
Well, sure, but then if you want to prove that they're abnormal, the word of a psychologist would suffice, right? You go to court and you want to prove that, for example, I think Vladimir Putin had someone executed yesterday or this morning. Okay. I'm not sure. I saw a bunch of things pop up, right? Now, execution isn't subtle. I think if you wanted to really take the power of someone away, you would discredit them and, put them into prison, or I don't know, Edward Snowden, what else? I don't know how to say it. I genuinely don't know how to say it because I see the root cause, but I don't have the little, facts and dates for you. All I'm saying is, if you were a big organization and you wanted someone's words to not be worth anything, you would take a psychologist and they would have the power of the priest as to say, this man is possessed, and everything he says should be used against him because he's not normal.
I see.
You see? And even if psychology is in a good spot, you can... The power itself, and I think that's what Alan Watts means. Hopefully we can get back to it. I hope it illustrates my point. Even the power of saying you are officially in charge of the saneness of a human. No matter how psychology gets developed, right? How developed psychology gets. If an organization can take someone, put him in a room with a psychologist, whatever happens in that room cannot be verified by other psychologists. And the psychologist can come out and write something on a paper, and that's a diagnosis, and that defines the entire saneness of that human. We have a problem, Roger, or whatever. We have a, yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I guess what you're saying is, like, in those specific situations, there's too much authority given to a psychologist, knowing that really we don't know that much about psychological disorders.
Ultimately, yeah.
Yeah, but you see how you're mixing two things still. Like, on one side, you're saying you can take a tweet from 15 years ago and paint the person as that type of person, and then the power of the psychologist saying to the public that this person is bipolar or whatever.
Okay, I guess I think the problem has spread in the sense that due to science actually progressing psychology enough to make it, more reasonable, and there's not going to be a Rosenhan experiment these days. So the problem has gotten more sophisticated, where now it's antidepressant and painkiller abuse, right? And it has spread to, the post-truth society media manipulation. Like, the problem is still there. If we're talking about the problem, you're trying to defend psychologists and trying to say, has there been progress there, and are we not as bad as the 1970s? Yes, that I agree with. But are we not as bad as a society as in the 1970s? No, I disagree that as a society we've progressed. Just because yin and yang, like, something's got to give, right? Something's got to give.
Yeah, we should continue with the thing.
We certainly should. Okay, so Thomas Sass, who wrote the book The Myth of Mental Illness, went to schools and saw little boys, and this is 1970, right? Like, the overdiagnosis of little boys with ADHD, that's a recent problem that we noticed, isn't it? But Thomas Sass, who wrote a book in the 1970s, went to school and started observing how boys were being, described or diagnosed. And you saw overachieving, underachieving, erratic patterns, dull and mediocre. So essentially everything was a diagnosis. You could just look at anyone in the class and anything could be a diagnosis. So this is where the myth of mental illness comes. And I guess a movement towards the acceptance of what was at the time considered abnormal. As Jung says, life itself is a sickness with a very poor prognosis. So this is obviously problematic. Now, how problematic that has stayed is up to argument, but at the very least in the 1970s.
Wait, what? What are you talking about?
So that essentially, if you really, really wanted to...
Oh, I thought you were talking about the quote, that's a problem. You just didn't finish the quote.
Well, I didn't like that he continued the quote because it's quite clear what he means. And everyone was already laughing, so it showed.
Right.
Okay. So yeah. The power to choose who enters this category is in the hands of modern psychiatry and is extremely dangerous. It is the sheerest arrogance to say that someone is qualified to do psychotherapy. Oh, and he also says that the term official psychotherapist is really out of financial self-interest in case they run into competition. Just to say that
Right.
I can do it, but you cannot do this. And the power is passed down, and you can see the parallel with, religion, how if you wanted to keep the power within a small group of people, that where the power is passed down, you would just say that you're official. Oh, then do you want to say the ferry boat?
Oh, you should say the ferry boat.
So in response to all this dogma and, you know, the grass doesn't have the right to grow on the other side, Alan Watts responds with the following Buddhist simile. There was a person running a ferry boat business on one side of the river and everything was going well. And then on the other side, another ferry boat business opens up and he goes to the government and he says, hey, I'm operating a business here. How can that be allowed? And he concludes with, let all operate ferry boats who will. And if you don't have the sense to stay off the one that sinks, it's your fault. Was that clear? I feel like I missed a part.
That was okay. I mean, I don't know. I understood it.
Yeah, because you know it. But yeah. Okay, so now to draw the parallel with the Western religion and psychiatry, we have to turn to what was the greatest heresy in Western religion? And it was first committed by Jesus, who believed himself to be God. At the very least, if you believe the Gospel of St. John. And he said it very clearly, I am the Father, he who has seen me has seen the Father. And in the Western world, you're not supposed to believe this. So he has a cosmic consciousness, well, he had a cosmic consciousness, or what we call nirvana, or what Zen calls satori. He was enlightened. And he tried to express it with Hebrew language. This is an act of insubordination and treason. It is to introduce a democracy into the kingdom of heaven. To claim this is to speak in the name of God without proper authorization. So
that I never understood. How is that introducing democracy in
I wanted to ask you,
the
unfortunately.
kingdom of heaven?
Is it democracy? So what is democracy? Just the power to elect?
No, but
I'm not sure.
by the people. So maybe like
Yeah.
since it's not a monarchy, it's not one god that rules everyone. It's democracy in the sense that everyone is God and the people rule themselves.
Fair. And you can represent someone in a way. You can.
I guess, but the main point is
Yeah.
it's not a monarchy where one person rules. There's many people.
Right.
in
So
power.
democracy just in contrast to a monarchy. Fair. So they asked Jesus in response to this, by whose authority do you speak? Of heaven or of men? And this is where I got to start respecting Jesus. Like he's a skilled conversationalist. He knows exactly what to say.
I think he's a skilled conversationalist in the same sense that Alan Watts was a skilled conversationalist at the end. I think when you have one unified worldview and you're sure of yourself and I don't know, in a sense you're right.
And it is a narrative in that sense where you can really take anything anyone says.
It's not like they're taking the thing and then they're saying, okay, they got me there. How can I get out of this? They're literally just answering honestly, right?
Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of parallels with everything in every human endeavor, because even in sales, right? If you believe in your product and you believe that it's the best thing for the other person, anything they say can just be
can and will be used against you.
Yeah, again, it can be aikidoed back to them, right? So let's say I'm the salesman, right?
Okay.
So I give you the pitch, you know, the product, and you say,
that's too expensive, man.
Too expensive?
Yeah, I can go out there and find anything cheaper in any supermarket.
Right. And the reason for that is because we have our own dedicated stores with experts in the place, right? And we have top-notch engineers. And those guys don't come cheap. Those guys go straight out of Harvard, straight into our offices, and they expect payment. So the reason you're paying for this is because you're getting the cutting-edge technology.
So what you're saying is I'm going to get a better product that lasts for longer and in the long term saves me more money?
Of course.
Yeah, and that's how, being sure of your product and having an internal consistency within your story.
Right. So if you take, I'm fascinated by narratives. Like I never thought, as a rational person, as a logical guy, You would never think that you can just take something and spin everything in its favor. But you can. So, okay. Now, to answer this, Jesus said, of what authority did John the Baptist speak? And essentially, if you trace it back, if you trace authority back, you get back to Moses and then you get back to God. I don't know how, but whatever. He did it. And the parallel with the modern times, and this hits. This really does hit.
Well, I don't know how he did it. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's just
No, I'm kidding. Like in a religious sense, in the history of religion sense, I don't know why he did it. But.
right.
So, and this hits because this is the way we write essays, right? Quote this. You can't have an original idea. And what he says is that essentially authority these days is footnotes, right? The more footnotes, the more the authority. Dissertations are books about books. Libraries multiply by mitosis. Ha 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 ha. So, but when someone speaks on authority, it should just mean that they speak as the author of those words. It is a statement of which you are the author and for which you assume responsibility. That's what it's supposed to be. But these days it's like, oh, well, who said that? And you have to trace it back.
Yeah, that's the hard thing with, I don't know, science. I wonder if you traced it back, like, I'm quoting this person, and then you trace back their influence and their influence and their influence. I feel like you would, not almost inevitably, but in a lot of cases, you would go back to Freud. And then Freud would, like, be the prophet that got something from
the Moses of psychology?
Exactly. Like, the Moses is a prophet, right? He hears directly from God. So if you draw a parallel, Freud would be a prophet because he heard directly from God in the sense that he listened to himself and developed his own theory, right? Within the narrative of what Alan Watts is presenting, we're all God, which we'll get to. And what being God is just, having this cosmic state of consciousness and being in tune with yourself ultimately and with everything around, because you are everything, you are God, whatever. And prophet, and then it gets passed down. And now I don't see one person, well, I see a couple people that aren't as hard on Freud, but so many people just hate completely on Freud, even though, and maybe because he was so innovative. He was so innovative.
True, just as Ye, Freud taught them, right?
You shouldn't talk about Ye.
Well, I mean, hey, if you want a modern example of someone who has an altered state of consciousness, you have Kanye.
Indeed.
Right? And I think that's what they mean. As soon as he says something controversial, whoops, he's off his meds, right? That's an easy thing to say.
A lot of people, I guess I haven't looked into it. I don't know, but a lot of people just saying he's bipolar. I wonder if
that's
they got
a big modern example. That's a problem, right?
I wonder if a psychiatrist gotten on that.
I hope with the billions of dollars he has, someone has confirmed it. Or with the billions of dollars he has shielded himself from ever being being in the need to no, that's
exactly.
fair.
And then when he's in his manic episodes, he does whatever he wants, and he has so much money that he can just.
Bonus again, if those manic episodes aren't aggressive and dangerous for anyone, doesn't that just result in the greatest art?
Well,
I mean, even if I disagree. Well, okay. This is not an episode about Kanye, and that'll be the name of the episode. So okay, they took the stones in their hands, as one would do in front of such a heretic, and they said, well, they were getting ready to punish him. And Jesus said, "Many good works have I shown you from the Father. For which of these do you stone me?" And they said, "Not for good works do we stone you, but for blasphemy, because you, being a man, make yourself God." Or maketh, probably. And Jesus said, "Is it not written in Scripture, I have said ye are gods? How do I blaspheme if I say I am son of God? Because son means of the nature of." I don't want to give the inappropriate example Alan Watts gives to illustrate this point, but if you're a son of a gun, you are of the nature of a gun. That doesn't mean your father or mother is a gun. he is of the same of one substance with the Father. After he said this, the Jews decided that's where it stopped. So they did a very interesting thing, right? He had such a good argument for indeed being God that they kicked him upstairs, right? They said, no, Jesus is special in this regard, and this is why this sickness cannot spread. And the way to illustrate it is essentially for everyone to start asking these questions.
I think there in the moment he got crucified and they killed him. But historically later, as Christianity grew, he got kicked upstairs in the sense that, oh, look, he was different. Like, not everyone is God. He got kicked upstairs and he's different.
Exactly. And how you do that is by making people ask the following questions. How do I know I will be resurrected 3 days later? How do I know that, I shouldn't worry for the morrow because God will give me bread and I don't need to work?
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, he explained that if people believed everything Jesus said and that God would take care of them, and they could blindly believe, well, not even blindly at that time, I guess he was telling them. Well, anyway, that essentially society would degrade in a way, and the people didn't want people to just stop working because God would take care of them, right? Like that's why it was dangerous for everyone to believe. So to know that you're God is another way to say that you're profoundly rooted in this universe. And that's where the Buddhist influence comes out with Alan Watts.
Yeah.
He says that. So if you don't feel this, you are a stranger to the world and therefore become hostile. You try to make the world submit to your will and become a real troublemaker. And this is what you can see these days, right? Like nature is really seen as the enemy more and more.
Mm.
Well, I don't know more and more, but it's a strong stance people have. Isn't it?
In what sense exactly?
Well, I can only go metaphorical right now. Like, you got to protect yourself against the sun. You got to... I don't know how to say it. But, okay, at the very least in contrast with Eastern religion and Eastern train of thoughts, do you see how the West is really man versus nature? Instead of man with nature?
Sure, but not particularly now. Particularly now, there's an environmentalist movement, and everyone wants to save the planet.
Yeah, but it's also instrumental, in the sense that, like, oh, you should just put things in the right boxes, and everything will be fine, and the sun will be less hot.
That's not how people perceive it. Wait, what do you mean? That's just instrumental, and then the thing you said after, I don't see the link between those.
Well, I guess it's not. Religious, it's not like the people who, let's say, argue for recycling today don't have the same view of nature as Marcus Aurelius and Buddhists. Let's just say that. Do you not agree with that? Like,
sure,
in a profounder sense.
It's closer than
not
humanity in the... Yeah, it's closer than not having any respect for nature at all.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not sure I want to go down those roads, but yeah, I get it. I agree.
I know that's hard for you to say.
Can we end the episode now? So, right, and essentially this hate and this alienation, I guess I'd say, makes you despise the world and everyone who... You can always point a finger at someone who is to blame except yourself, which is problematic in itself. And as Alan Watts says, if you aren't ready to take it away, you must assume responsibility for it. And this was in my notes, and you said this to me yesterday in our 30-second discussion of this, is that this is exactly what we mean by level 2 and level 3, right? When Camus says things about taking one's life away, and we say, well, I don't know, or like the absurdity of life, my bad, the absurdity of life, and we just say, well, okay, if you are here speaking to me of nihilism and the absurdity of life, then wake up, because you already chose to live it, so now let's work on this, let's build onto it. So this is how to go from level 2 to level 3, I think, right? It's not level 1 and level 2, right?
I don't have it mapped out in my head.
I think it's 2 and 3, because 1 is oblivion is bliss. Which one is bliss?
Ignorance?
Ignorance is bliss. 1 is not even realizing that life doesn't mean anything. 2 is realizing that it doesn't mean anything. And 3 is realizing that if it doesn't mean anything and you choose to live it still, you got to give it meaning.
It's also the mountain metaphor that Alan Watts gives.
Everything is everything.
He's so proud.
So the real meaning of karma is, the actual word is doing. So karma isn't, an accumulation of your good deeds in the past life that will come through in this. When someone says it is your karma, it means it is of your own doing. So you did this to yourself. This is what it means. I forgot its relation with our prior discussion. But here we get to part 2. And maybe we can, I've outlined some key points, some key questions that he answers pretty masterfully. And this is the thing, well, I don't want to exaggerate, but this is, Alan Watts really illustrates how Jesus could have been a normal person, a normal man, who did get this enlightenment and this thought that he was indeed God. And being the first one and the most skilled at arguing for it, he just created this whole movement of Christian religion, right? Do you not see
historical Jesus of Nazareth?
Yeah.
Yeah, the only problem is the
blood wine thing, well, the water wine.
Yeah, the catastrophes and the whatever, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Maybe he had a sigh, maybe he had premonition.
Maybe he put VR on everyone.
Sure, yeah, fair enough. Google glasses and whatnot. So, okay, a person asks, am I also God? And he says yes. And then he says, tell us about Satan. This is really an interesting answer. Alan Watts says, in the court of heaven, he is the district attorney. He is not the enemy of heaven or of mankind. He just sees the bad side of things and carries out the dirty work. It's just the defense versus the prosecution. So that's a pretty beautiful way to view it, where you really are the person in control, but the person who's going to see the tally at the end and really, point out the mistakes is going to be Satan. I feel like that gives you control over life.
Yeah, but what about the devil in our life? The devil is the force that drives us to do all the bad things. Why that? How does that story? Should have asked him. I don't know how that story
you would
fits
want to a sub point of that question.
I guess in another one of his talks, he talks about if you want to do a good thing, you mustn't let the devil see.
Right.
You mustn't let the devil know.
Yeah, but
right?
the devil is always yourself in that sense.
Yeah, but then the devil is the attorney.
You have to fool yourself. Yeah, sure, but then, okay. I really wish you would read my blog, but the blog I'm talking about comes out in 2 weeks. But it's really on us being God, and essentially tomorrow you being God. I think you'd love it, but I think the real punishment...
Tomorrow, me being God?
Yeah, tomorrow you is God. I think you should read it. It's 2.5 pages, but essentially, I think the punishment, if you really go away from this religion, if you view...
You were going to say mumbo jumbo.
No. Yeah, I actually wasn't, though. If you really, really see it for what it is in our lives, the punishment is really all your guilty conscience.
Mm.
And if you want to see the courtroom and Satan judging you, it's really stealing bread one day and then being eaten up from inside by guilt the other day.
Jean Valjean reference.
Sure, we'll take it. We'll take it. Les Miserables. As the Englishman would say it. So, man has free... Okay, so do we have free will? Man has free will to the extent that he knows who he is, not otherwise. That's very interesting. I don't know.
That's a Jungian idea too. He says integrating your shadow, integrating your unconscious into your ego is the way to gain, more control, more free will.
If you deny nature and your subconscious as active parts of your decision making, then it's always going to be a fight and it's never going to be free. But once you embrace them, that's so genius. I didn't see that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always what Jung was talking about. That if you restrict yourself to your ego and you sort of rationally try to say, as he says in the beginning, right? I'm above nature and my unconscious can't control me and whatever, it inevitably ends up to control you, even if you don't notice it and in big ways. But if you integrate your urges and your primal desires or whatever and get everything together, knowing yourself, that's how you gain free will.
Yeah. Okay, what is God? There is nothing that is not God. Okay. Boredom is on the other side of creativity. It is the underlying yin and yang of the universe. And he says, if you understand that, you really don't need to understand anything else. And the more I advance through life, I get exactly what he's saying. If you get the yin and yang of life, there's really nothing else to understand. Do you get it? Do you see examples in your life?
Partly, but I think that it's a constant state of learning. I mean, my camp counselor name is Yin Yang.
Yeah, but that doesn't give you insight
Into what it means?
Into what it means.
No, I'm just saying I've been on it.
Sure, you've been on it, but okay, well.
What I was going to say is that it's an ever-learning process. I'm sure you're going to realize that the yin and the yang apply to many more things that you don't know yet.
Oh, of course. Yeah, 100%. So, I am responsible for the world, the way the world is. If I couldn't feel that, I'd have to blame somebody else. This is essentially the entire subject of my blog that comes out this Monday. No. That will have come out once this episode is out. This is inconceivable, and I know that other lives are... Oh, this is very interesting, and this is exactly what Phil was saying. I am responsible for the way the world is. If I couldn't feel that, I'd have to blame somebody else. That would be inconceivable. And I know that under the right set of circumstances, I would have been the biggest rascal. And essentially, it's just the way I see it now with my computational psychology classes. Humans are just machine learning mechanisms that whatever you input into them, the output is always going to be the same. And by the way, with everything I'm learning now and the acquisition of expertise, psychology, computer science, machine learning, algorithms being the best parallel for human consciousness and learning, the nature versus nurture debate, I mean, it's a hard day for nature right now because nurture is everything. And I think this is what it means, right? Put any human in the exact set of circumstances as another person that they despise or has a certain behavior, you're going to be them, right? You would be their biggest rascal if put in exactly in their situation. But not like right now, like I take you, put you into poverty, and you will steal bread. I don't know if you would do that, but I'm saying since day one. And that's just how life is, right?
Yeah.
That's a big realization, I think. The world works in an undulating process. I liked when he said that. If it always went up, we wouldn't know which way it is going. If everything was light, there would be nothing to write home about. I really like that. I noted it down. Commandments are sometimes given not in the expectation that they will be obeyed, but in the expectation that they will reveal something to those that hear them. St. Paul said that. Interesting.
Very religious. But I think that earlier thing you said is the main thing about, well, which is one of the applications of the yin and the yang, right? The necessary of evil, because in a real sense, good only exists because evil exists. If all your life was always just going up, what is up? There is no up. It's just your life progressing.
100%. You know, when this was approached from a philosophical standpoint and the problem of evil and all of that, I kind of just ignored it. I didn't understand. But when you talk about it in metaphors and the way Alan Watts puts it, and I don't know, it just, the way he says things, it gets internalized instantly because he has the best metaphor, the best story, and you're instantly like, yep, that's exactly how life works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then people ask about the hereafter. And then he says,
the hereafter.
The hereafter is now. Because if you examine it closely, there's nowhere else but now. If you want to make hell out of it, you can. If you want to make heaven out of it, you can make it heaven.
Purgatory.
So isn't that interesting? This is what you've been saying about heaven on earth. And it confirms so many intuitions we had. And it felt good to hear him say it, and him with the deepest knowledge of every single religion, probably.
And the deepest voice and accent.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. The way he talks is great too. So...
Yeah, I really feel like he's a cult leader and I'm getting indoctrinated, but I'm
and it
all
feels
for
good.
it.
And it feels good. You can relinquish control. It's all easy. So, another thing that is very interesting is that he says that this is the way to defeat the infinite regression of the why of people who get too stuck up in philosophy and in children. Because, you ask... why this? Why this? Why this? And then you essentially regress to, I don't know, the Big Bang or the creation of the universe, and you can never explain it. But what he says is, you can cut it off right there and just say, look, I don't have to give you an account of the beginning of the universe because there's only now. It started now. Like the universe started right now. You don't have to imagine what it was a few billion years ago. All that matters is now. And in a deep sense, he's right. So what is death? Not super interesting. Or, I mean, it's an undulation in consciousness. How could you know that you were alive if you had never been dead before? So yeah, this is, again, I'm guessing this is the rebirth process in Buddhism, which, I don't know, it's funny in the way that it makes sense. When you get to, curing boredom with surprise button...
Did you think about what the surprise button was?
In the story of religion, it's definitely the creation of the universe. But for us, I think it can be anything, really.
Okay.
But he did... I do feel like...
curiosity, exploring something new.
Yeah, maybe.
Doing something
I think his audience seemed to understand it really well, because they laughed every time he said it. Right? Just press the surprise button. If everything's boring, just what to press. And in the sense of God, that was the creation of the universe. He was bored. He already, explored every avenue of possibility. He created giraffes with, huge, long, very, extremely long necks. So, okay, I think we're getting tired. I'm getting tired. There are a few good ones, but I just like to end it with, someone said, what if everyone did that? And his best objection was, I think that's a similar objection to what if everyone caught the 4 o'clock train at Grand Central Station? Or what if every single molecule of air decided to group up right in the spot that this molecule of air is right now? What would happen then? I guess the universe would explode, wouldn't it? So he doesn't like that objection because everyone is different. And everyone will always do some of these things. And you can't just say, what if everyone did that? Because not everyone is going to do that.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, and this is why I litter. So are you omniscient? And he says that, you don't have to oversee the universe and see far into the future. And this is very Buddhist, but the universe is within you, and you can just observe it from inside because you're part of the universe. So you can just access it through meditation. Anyway, again, you have to get deep into Buddhism to really understand what he means. It doesn't really seem to have value to the average Westerner. Anyway, I think that's all I had to say. I kind of hogged the mic, as one would say, and it was more of a reading episode, and we dodged Camus, which I'm pretty happy about. It'll be for next week. Yeah. It'll be for next week. We're going to read both parts of it. I apologize for the reading structure, but we really wanted to share our insights on Alan Watts. I still hope we had a few good discussions and made some parallels with today. And we both agreed that, psychology is in a dire state. Obviously,
all he ever says is not representative of the...
But that's the conclusion.
Not representative of Thinkin Bros and the Psychological Association.
Okay. All right. Figured it out rating, man. 3, 2, 1,
9.
8.
That's
Really?
good. Yeah. 8,
Really?
8 sounds good.
Yeah, I think it should be 8. Because, again, there are a few things that I'm not even deep enough into Buddhism to understand of what he said. There are words like the surprise button that I don't know what it means. The parallel between exactly the altered state of consciousness of Jesus and like a specific example today, right now, is kind of hard to make. I'm glad Kanye came up because I do think he's an example. Now, to which extent his actions and words harm others is up to debate for sure. So, yeah, but I'd like to settle on 8. Any practical recommendations? Listen to Alan Watts for sure.
Literally just listen to one thing, anything from Alan Watts and see
Your
how
life
you
will be
feel.
changed.
I only said 9 just because how good I felt listening to that
That's fair.
podcast.
But how much we understood. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's like a parable, right? Like you can keep giving and giving and giving. We could rewatch the episode probably.
In another talk he gives, he says that he's an entertainer. He's not there, like he's not a teacher. He's not there to teach anything. In the same way that you go listen to a musician for the sound of the music, you should go listen to him for the enjoyment of whatever he
Structure of
says.
the words he puts together.
Yeah.
100%. All right. Well, I mean, I think this is the first episode where, well, except for the season 1 where we had only one subject.
Oh, you should make a season 1 Thinkin Bros folder.
Maybe we should. Anyway. Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you for listening. Go to thinkinbros.com for more information or contact us at thinkinbros@gmail.com. I think we stopped for a while, but now we answer every question. Linda?
Yeah, we
so,
do.
yeah, we answer every question. So, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week. I was Chris.
Alex, see ya.